Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. I have Dr. Halland Chen, and I am extremely excited because he is, if you don't know, one of the most prolific longevity NAD specialists and cellular experts there is in the world. He has regenerative medicine and longevity and concierge clinics all across the US and in South America. He works with CEOs, high performance athletes, like top of the top of the top of the top when it comes to this research. So we go down very interesting paths on longevity, how to live forever, how high-end clients get treated, what those look like, where this technology is going. Without further ado, let's jump in on the pod. Excited to dive in and let us know with a thumbs up if you like this episode. Dr. Halland Chen, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. I think I want to start. There's a lot of places we could start with you. Double board certified physician, longevity doctor, influencer, etc. Maybe my first question would be the topic of longevity. How would you actually define that? We talked about this last night while sharing a couple of drinks. I think a lot of people get caught up on longevity, health span, live forever, die graciously, right? It'd be awesome to hear from you as the expert in the field. Where do we define that and how?
I think wellness is just a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
On the one end, or even longevity is a spectrum, right? On one end, you have illness, and on the other end is like longevity, aka peak performance, or whatever you want to call it. And then a lot of us are somewhere in the middle, right? I think when you get older, you're pretty much more on the chronic illness side. Well, not all older people, but a good portion of people now, right?
Yeah.
They have this illness state. And then you go from, feeling okay to peak performance to longevity. And it's a spectrum as well. And so I think longevity just means, what do I do that's above and beyond my normal baseline health, right? And I think this term like preventative medicine, it really never took off because preventative medicine just said, don't do this, don't smoke, don't drink, etc. But the reality is people still do some of these things. So can you do another lifestyle add-on that might counter those effects? Or let's say you stopped, and can you improve, right? Medicine's typically very what I call reactive. You have a problem. They don't even treat the problem when it's not a real problem. They wait for it to be a real problem, then we treat it. So
yeah. In that lens, right? Why do you think that medicine became very reactive versus proactive?
I think it's just by design. I think people had illness. We didn't have great detection mechanisms back in the days, maybe whether it was lab testing, imaging. Our level of knowledge of the disease has actually evolved where you can actually say, you don't just have diabetes, you have pre-diabetes. But then to treat pre-diabetes, some people don't have coverage by their insurance, and you can't get a CGM, for example, unless you're full-on diabetic.
Right.
But if you actually had a CGM, which stands for continuous glucose monitor, you could actually not develop diabetes. So I think that's kind of the problem now. We're actually kind of in this gray zone where longevity people think it's only for people who can do all these interventions and everything fancy. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's really, we're in a very toxic environment with foods and other environmental toxins. If we could just start counteracting or combating these things, we would be more healthier and less sick.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate. If you're doing the bad things or trying to counteract them, ideally you get to maybe equilibrium, let's just call it. But notoriously the bad things, and correct me if I'm wrong, are usually very addictive, more compulsive, and then doing the good things is a little bit harder to do and takes effort. And so isn't there a negative incentive?
Could be. I mean, It depends what you define as bad. Everyone has a different...
Fair. So maybe that's a good...
I think, like, for example, it's bad to not sleep a lot.
Yeah.
Right? But most people, well, I don't know most, but I'm pretty sure we're like one of the only mammals that sleep deprive ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so that could be a bad thing by not getting enough sleep, but it's such an easy thing to do, but it's hard, right? So I think things like that, eating healthy could be a sort of a bad thing that's not being done, but sometimes people's lives don't allow them to eat healthy. It might be time, it might be financial, it might be work related, and they just don't have the bandwidth to actually know what to do and eat healthy. So I think the reason why I bring up the whole, if you do something quote unquote bad and you want longevity, you do something good, it's the fact that, a lot of people might view longevity as you have to do a very strict protocol. You got to sleep 8 hours. You can only eat so many carbs. And I think by being a little bit more relaxed on it, it allows it to be more accessible for everybody.
Yeah. I think that's a great point and I want to touch on a little bit more because There's this whole notion of, hey, if you have a morning routine and you do all these things, you stack small wins. And so you feel like you have momentum and then the day's easy and in flow.
Mhm.
And I think where that breaks is, what about when you travel? What about when something gets interrupted? What about when, you have to get outside of your house and socialize? Those things kind of fall apart. And then people will get maybe stressed or anxiety over, oh, I didn't do the perfect day. And therefore, I should just do nothing anymore. And then it kind of stacks. How do you approach making sure that that's not the case? Because your message already has been, look, we don't need to do the exact same things at the exact same time every single day to have longevity.
Right.
How do you approach it with A, clients, and B, education that you put out?
I think one of the key things is routines, right? I have this longevity mindset framework. It's called the 5 H's. Of one of those H's, it stands for habits. And habits are just a framework. Like if you don't do them all day or you miss out on part of your routine, it's okay. I travel a lot, and for sure I'm going to miss certain habits because I might not have access to the gym equipment that I want to use. Or maybe I run out of my supplements and I didn't have time to pack them or bring them with me. So I think it's really having enough positive habits in your life that even if you don't do 10 out of 10, but you did even 7 out of 10, 5 out of 10, you're still winning than just saying, I quit, you know? Which some people do, and that's okay. Like, you can just quit. It's just like your New Year's resolutions, you make I would say just do more. Make 20 resolutions and achieve 10. Don't make 10 and achieve 5.
Yeah.
So it really kind of depends, also how well you know your body.
Yeah.
And I think that's also where we get into this longevity spectrum of things. It's I think the whole annual physical is kind of I think it's very inadequate in the healthcare system. Like, you're going to see your doctor one time a year, and what are they going to really do for you?
Right.
It's really, I think where we're going now in this field of functional medicine, wellness, longevity, I think people need a health coach, right?
Yeah.
And we're not talking about fitness alone. We have personal trainers. We even have people who have personal chefs or whatever. I think having someone be a health advisor for you is very important. And they may not necessarily have to be a doctor. It'd be nice if they could provide that insight, but people even with nutritional coaching backgrounds, functional diagnostic backgrounds can be a great resource for people.
Yeah, that's a good point. What if I'm listening to this and I'm going, okay, Dr. Chen is making a lot of sense. I don't really know where to start, right? Like, I hear a podcast here, a podcast there, an influencer here, TV's telling me this is the best new diet. It can feel very overwhelming. And even the thought of making 20 resolutions and hitting 10, it's like, how do I even go? Like, what would be your thought process in giving that person advice?
I would say just start with what you think you can do and what you like. So if you like to eat, start with food. If you like to work out or you don't work out, start with that. Sometimes it's almost counterintuitive. Start with the hardest thing and just stick to that one thing. So there's many ways to do it. You could do things that you like and are easy to achieve. You could set a goal for something that's hard and make that your one thing that you do all year.
Yep.
I think it really comes to identifying what's important to you. And that's going to be personalized for everybody.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's dive into, you obviously deal with high-end clients that are doing the latest, the greatest. Has there been one technology, protocol, routine, supplement, I'm going to throw this kitchen sink at you, that you found has been the key now, maybe versus before, that you're pushing, that you're seeing great results with?
So I think NAD is a game changer for pretty much 99% of people, right?
Okay.
NAD is a molecule. It's a cofactor. It stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
Yep.
In our world, in the wellness world, biohacking world, pretty much a lot of people know about it. But quite surprisingly, there's still a lot of people who don't know about it. And NAD can come in the form of an IV. I think that's the strongest format.
Yeah.
You can take oral precursors such as NMN or NR, and that generates NAD in the cells. I think they do two different things, actually, when you compare IV versus oral. That's part of our research. We're very heavy into the research side of things. We study cell metabolism. We are very into regenerative medicine. But I would say something that is very easy to achieve, whether you do something that you can buy online, whether it's a supplement, NAD, and then obviously the more medical version, which is the IV format. I think that's great.
Gotcha. Why is it so great?
So your body needs energy to do everything, right? Cell productions, chemical reactions, metabolic waste removal. So NAD is taken up by your mitochondria. Your mitochondria produce this thing called ATP. That's your body's basic fuel cell block. And with this ATP, it can then generate energy to carry out all these cellular processes. In fact, I think one of the reasons why we age is actually due to a lack of NAD. And there's some interesting research out there that would suggest that. And so this whole other concept of inflammaging, where inflammation is also causing your aging.
Right.
And inflammation can't really be controlled that well if you don't have enough energy in your body to facilitate this.
Which makes sense, right? If everything is energy, like you wake up, get up, you have to exert energy, even to eat, which is energy source, you have to eat, which is energy expenditure. Increasing energy makes things more easy, let's just say, in layman's terms. And I think David Sinclair probably put NMN on the map on like a large scale. I think you've been instrumental in doing so as well. Outside of that, is there other technologies, breakthroughs in biotech, biology that you're excited, that maybe are not there yet right now, but that you're excited about that are coming down?
I think in the regenerative medicine space, we do a lot of research in mesenchymal stem cells. There are clinical trials which allow you to study these cells. And then obviously if a patient meets criteria, there's things called the Right to Try Act. These are all important because if you have certain criteria and it's being studied under like an FDA type of controlled style study, these are things that are have high potential, right? Because these are your body's also basic healing blocks, right? You have a stem cell that can turn into certain things like tissue. It can promote actually a decrease in inflammation. It has healing growth factors in there. Our body is made up of stem cells. And again, as we age, we have less proliferation. They're probably not as active. And so really the research, I think, will go into that. I think the research is going to go into sort of this biological era where we're using sort of these ortho or biological instruments to help people get better.
Personally, and this is a personal question because I'm very interested. In terms of longevity, the two technologies that I've seen that I'm really, really excited about are CRISPR, so DNA and gene editing software, essentially, or biology. And then the second one would be, nanoparticles that can repair cells. I've been reading about this stuff for probably almost a decade now, and every time I read about it, it's like, we're at the cusp, and it never seemingly happens. In my opinion, it's like I haven't seen anything other than those two technologies that could actually extend, living past 100 as a standard. Are you, because you're very in tune with this industry, are you seeing development in that area that's exciting you, or is it still way too early?
I think it's probably way too early. I think also my focus is more on the regenerative side of things, cell metabolism. So I probably put more of my energy there than focusing on, like, for example, gene editing. I would say some of this is also a regulatory compliance question, really, because, what is the scope of gene editing, and are you kind of playing God? Or are you kind of doing things that, we don't know what the consequences are, right? So I think that's the hard part. So I think where medicine will evolve is we're just going to get more sophisticated with the current tools, and those current tools then evolve into the next phase of things.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think it's hard to predict, but I've kind of been keeping an eye on it. I don't know if I would see it anytime soon.
I know. And this is, people get mad at me sometimes. I'm like, I'm the most bullish on health tech, and I have a company in it, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of, there's some other light products, right? There's like some gene edited tools where people inject a plasmid in you and it produces a certain peptide in your body. I mean, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, we have to kind of see if this long-term plays out, though.
For sure. Let's go back to stem cells for a second. Lots of controversy, lots of opinions one way or the other. It doesn't work. It doesn't matter. You can't, people place them in certain areas, and then people argue that doesn't work that way. I know you're in that industry. I have a friend, he has the largest stem cell clinic in Mexico and maybe actually in North America. They just built a huge facility. And he did it there because of regulation issues in the US. And I know a lot of friends that have done stem cells and had great experiences. So maybe let's unpack, why are stem cells, why is there controversy in the first place? And then B on that question is, how are you using them and in what capacity?
So I think stem cells are controversial because it's a very generic term, right? Back in the days, people would think about embryonic stem cells, which is controversial, right? Because it, from aborted fetuses, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's probably not even the best stem cell for you, right? There are many reasons why you may not want to do it. It's first off not autologous, which means self to self.
Yeah.
It's an allogenic, which could also have potential, especially in the embryonic world. Those can form tumors. They're called teratomas, right?
Yeah.
Because they're a little bit different than what we call like a mesenchymal stem cell, which is an MSC, or hematopoietic stem cell, which is found in bone marrow. Now, that being said, I think in the stem cell world, because a lot of these studies are either private facilities or, like, let's say local labs working under like a research grant, you don't really see a lot of the prelim data because it's still being published or being collected for publishing. But I would say in the stem cell world, the reason why there's not a lot of clarity, you have people who are out there who are not experts. They just like the idea, and they build a business around it. But liking the idea and building a business around it is not the same thing as actually doing the research, understanding the cell physiology, maybe even going through a PhD program or medical school, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the controversy, is that you have some good players out there and you have some people who are just not as experienced. And then, the reality is, like, if you have questions about stem cells or whatnot, you'd want to think about, what's the dose? We don't really, quote unquote, know what the dose is, but, from prelim research and understanding how cell physiology works, you got to be in 100 million. 100 million stem cells, 200 million stem cells is considered like a therapeutic dose, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a really hard number to achieve for certain reasons. And so when you look into certain stem cells therapeutics, they're going to have to expand your stem cells, right? In the US, that's not really a thing for many reasons. That's why there are clinical studies that are going to be studying the nature of stem cells, how do you expand them, et cetera. I think those are like what I call the fundamental early questions, right?
Yeah.
And then after you answer those fundamental early questions, which are actually pretty complex with many layers to them, it then comes down to what indication, what is the treatment protocol? Obviously cost will be a factor. I think that's another reason why stem cells have some controversy around it. They can be quite expensive, and you don't get a result. That's not really a fun feeling, right? So I think where we are now from a stem cell technology standpoint, it does exist. There are some very good technology out there that can do, isolation of healthy stem cells, cloning them, expanding them, getting it to a therapeutic dose. It really then comes down to, do you have a condition that is appropriate for it? And is there a clinical trial you can enroll yourself in for that?
Gotcha. A little bit more on that topic, just because I also have friends in this space. For example, in Mexico, the way they administer stem cells is they get them from women 18 to 22. It's a 3-step process. First, they vet who that person is, their history. Then they do they have any disease in the body? And that's 3 lab tests to confirm. Then they extract stem cells, and those are the ones administering to patients. Is that, with what you were saying, is that the way you approach it, or what would you say about that?
I would say that's one way to approach it.
Yeah.
Again, is what's good, right, wrong, good or bad? That's just one way to do it.
Sure.
Now, in an ideal world, how would I want to do it?
Yeah. How would you?
I think you should do an autologous stem cell. So you can get stem cells, for example, from bone marrow or adipose. Adipose has mesenchymal stem cells.
Yeah. My
preference would be an MSC. Mesenchymal stem cells are very potent and powerful. Once you harvest that, you want to create a lifetime bank. You harvest once, you clone them, you make your lifetime bank. And then from that lifetime bank, whenever you need cells, you pull a small sample and you clone it. You really don't want to go above 4 passages, which means you're cloning it once, switch culture mediums, cloning it twice. So there's a lot of technology involving, can you actually expand these cells and make a very high potent dose very quickly? That's the secret sauce, right? And that's kind of where things are actually going now.
That's super interesting. So you're basically, let's use me as a case study. You go into my bone marrow, you extract some cell.
We would do fat.
Okay,
I would say fat.
Okay, if you go into my fat, you extract the cells, we freeze them or whatever we're doing to preserve until...
Yeah, whenever you need it.
I have a motorcycle accident.
You have an accident,
let's just say,
or autoimmune condition,
comes up.
Neurodegenerative, like certain indications.
Yeah.
Like the idea is that it's on-demand cells when you need them.
Yeah. And
it's your genetic material.
Which is
ideal.
Like, you can't even argue that. How could that philosophy on its own not be better than exogenous, like something else?
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It makes all logical.
Yeah. The cloning part, I'm sure people are like going to be in the comments already. How do we like what, is that technology that we have today that's
Yeah, no, I mean,
amazing?
cloning's been around forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not forever, but a good amount of time. It's just, again, making sure you're compliant, because the FDA wants to regulate it because you're basically making a drug in the FDA's eye, right? That's why it's called an IND when you do the research study, which stands for investigational new drug.
Yeah.
Even though it's your cells, your DNA, your body,
Yeah.
if it's processed in a research study, it's basically an investigational new drug, which is fine, makes sense, right? You're doing a therapeutic effect.
Sure.
And so when you're talking about cloning is a very specific process, right? And there's different types of cloning technologies, there's different methodologies, there's secret sauce and how you process things, how you time things. So I think that's the difference between like something that's like a C plus and an A plus, right?
Right.
You can clone something, but your clone of a C plus stem cell process is not going to get you anywhere near the results of an A plus process.
Yeah, which makes sense. How many years ago was it when they cloned that goat?
You mean Dolly, the sheep?
Dolly, yeah, sheep. Sorry,
yeah, that was a while ago.
It was like 10, I think, over a decade.
Over a decade,
if not like 20 years.
Yeah, much longer. I mean, and the thing with that, they cloned it. That sheep, Dolly, but then the telomeres were short. So even though Dolly was young, she was old. It was old DNA, right?
Like biologically.
Yeah, biologically old. So there's a lot of like nuances. But again, back then that was pretty incredible. They actually still cloned an exact copy of this sheep. And,
Yeah, you know what? It's actually a good talking point. I remember like early 2000s, we had this huge unlock of the Human Genome Project, so DNA, and then we cloned Dolly. And in my head, I was like, we're about to like change the world in ways unimaginable. And I don't feel like that happened.
No.
It felt like huge innovation and then 20 years of almost
it's
incremental
It's
gain.
not scalable, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of safety and regulation, which is fine. That makes sense. We wouldn't want people to clone
whatever
themselves or
yeah.
I mean, the latest I've seen is someone can clone their pet dog. I mean, that's kind of cool. But there's a bit of controversy around that too, because the whole process is not very, straightforward and it doesn't always work. So, but I think it's not going to take off as easily because there's so little understanding of it. So I'm a big researcher in terms of like doing the basic science, understanding cell physiology. That's actually why I'm so interested in the NAD molecule. I think we have some time away. It's not like what we're seeing now in AI. AI is just rapidly doubling, because there's a lot of black and whiteness to some AI, right? Some aspects there's not. I think when it comes to stem cells, there's more clarity happening, but the clarity really comes down to like, look, there are people who are going to pursue regenerative medicine options. That's great. I think it is the future. You just have to understand, is it reputable? Is there a lot of science backing this? Do you understand the science? Are they making false claims? You can navigate the field as a patient, as a client, as a practitioner. You just want to do things that are very compliant. You want to make sure it's safe for you. And hopefully you're getting some sort of therapeutic benefit. And look, you may get no benefit, but then hopefully it's still safe, right?
For sure.
Do no harm.
Yeah, do no harm, which is the Hippocrates Code, right? Interesting you went on a couple subjects, which leads me to my next question. I think the convergence of technology usually creates innovation, or a lot of time exponentially expedites it. And maybe like for listeners, a good example of that would be Uber. The only reason Uber could exist is because the iPhone came out. Then everybody had a phone that was a computer, and then internet speeds caught up so that you could actually order a car, right? And then Uber came out and there was all these new models of monetization and crowdsourcing, etc. In medicine and in the medical field, we've probably touched on a couple of things: cloning, stem cells, regenerative medicine, protocols, DNA. Do you feel like the convergence of any technologies together, like AI we just touched on, are interesting right now?
I think AI is going to change the face of medicine for many reasons, whether it's lab analysis, simplifying workflows, allowing people of all sorts of, walks of life have access to top tier medicine. I think it'll be overall positive.
Yeah.
Right. I think AI, there's just too much knowledge out there that's being constantly generated. It's going to be too overwhelming for a doctor or clinicians or hospitals to keep up. So I think I think AI will change medicine. It's just going to be who's going to bring in that new era around.
Do you think that regulation is going to be the deciding factor on how fast that happens?
No, I mean, I think it's going to be more about execution and implementation.
Yeah.
I think regulation's more on the therapeutic and treatment side.
Sure.
I think on the AI side and tech side, it's going to be who can implement and execute it in a very responsible way, which is the same problem AI has for any industry.
Sure.
Right.
That's very fair.
So I would say for medicine, it's going to be more so about that. But, a lot of the I would say a lot of the areas that are going to be areas of concern will be probably about patient privacy, like whatnot. But I think overall, if anything can increase the vast array of knowledge and analyzing it, healthcare needs it the most.
Very much agree. I think it's like healthcare is in many different ways broken. And if we can fix those holes quickly, it's going to be a net positive for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Let's go a little bit different now. I know your story is unique in the sense that you became an MD, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. You became an MD, and that day you're like, I'm never going to work as a medical doctor in the traditional way. What sparked that thought
Should
process?
we wait for this then to go, though?
It's already on.
Oh, it is? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I just interrupted your thought.
No,
Bill,
it's
you want
okay.
to say it again?
I'll go again.
Okay.
Yeah. So going back to kind of your roots of getting into medicine, when you became a medical doctor, which you did become one, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. It was like the day that you became one, you knew that you didn't want to go the traditional doctor route. What sparked that thought process?
Well, I think I've always been a technologist. I've enjoyed tech. I actually had a software company even while I was in residency building products. So I think when you're sort of a builder mindset and liking to fix things, and healthcare, the whole system inherently is a little bit broken, it's very hard to practice traditional medicine in that way. Now, I still believe in aspects of traditional medicine, right? There's certain illnesses and conditions, you need to diagnose it this way, you treat it that way. But I think part of it really comes about I fundamentally believe the body can heal itself, right? In general, right? There's obviously certain things you have to intervene, right? But even if you had high blood pressure and not so great blood sugar levels, which could be pre-diabetic, you don't need to take medications for that.
Yeah.
And so I think fundamentally where that sort of shift happened was I was seeing a lot of medicine was being governed by how your insurance would cover something or not cover something. So even if a patient or client needed something, but insurance didn't cover it, well, then I would say that's how you practice medicine. And that just fundamentally didn't make sense, right? For example, the pre-diabetic, at least what I've seen in some cases, if you're pre-diabetic, you don't qualify for a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. But once you're diabetic, we'll cover it. But the whole idea is to not become diabetic, right? So in that case, we should cover it from an insurance perspective so that they can see the numbers and then do these things preemptively. That would actually be a cost savings to the healthcare ecosystem and the insurance company. So I think when I say non-traditional, I think non-traditional means I don't want to just practice medicine because someone at the insurance company said, do it this way, or we can't do something because there's not necessarily a pill for it. I feel that's kind of why this whole wellness, biohacking, longevity community has become so strong, is because I think in reality, in modern times now, we actually have to do these things because 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have the problems like we have now, right? Like there are people who are in their teens and 20s getting cancers that never really happened. There are people who are prematurely getting chronic diseases that never happened. We're having illnesses that are not normal. So it's almost like you have to take these extra proactive steps just to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's kind of really shaped a large part of my belief system.
No, that's a great point. Actually, two things I want to dive into there. One is you mentioned early on, healthcare is broken. I think the caveat and what some will think immediately is, well, every industry is always kind of broken. Like nothing's perfect. But you did touch upon one thing that, hey, for example, if somebody's a pre-diabetic and we prevent them from becoming diabetic, that's a $13,000 a year savings to insurance companies on known reasons they're going to go to the hospital or have administered care on. Can you give some other specific examples of how healthcare is broken, just so the audience can resonate with what you...
Sure. Like, for example, knee replacements. It's a lot easier to get like a knee replacement than it might be to get your fourth cortisone shot approved, or a lubricant, which is called like Hyaluronic, or like a very viscous type substance, jelly type substance put in your knee, because there are not there's certain criteria. They said, well, you already had 2 cortisone shots. Your insurance doesn't cover this gel lubricant. Okay, but you can do a knee replacement or arthroscopy surgery, right? Arthroscopic surgery. And that's just because some of these rules might have been based off of old clinical studies, right? And that's okay. But we're in modern times now, right? And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not going to cover the HRT topic because that's more of a controversial one, but there's HRT is good, HRT is bad, HRT is good. And so these are things that there's a lot of morbidity and mortality is what we call it, associated with this. And I think the hard part is that the research advances much faster than, let's say, clinical guidelines. And so I think back to our old topic, I think this is where AI will help us, right? Because if AI does a meta-analysis of all the research that's out there and it cranks it out in a responsible way that's vetted and not biased, then that should be the protocol.
Gotcha. If you're cool with it, I'd love to actually dive into the HRT topic, only because I have plenty of friends. Actually, it's shocking how many of my friends have jumped on HRT. Mm-hmm. Some of them I had a talk with where I was like, is there anything else you did to optimize hormones before you did that? And they were like, I looked online and the answer was always, there's nothing I can do, And then I have friends who have done a lot of things and it didn't improve, but still wanted the levels to go higher. There's been some controversy. I think maybe what you're alluding to is just some clinicians are just giving it out like candy. It's almost like, yeah, level's just a little low. Here's HRT, and it's a really good revenue driver for the clinic. What's your thought process on hormone replacements? How do you view it? And, the one train of thought is it's a net positive, even though we don't know long-term effects, but long-term effects might be really bad.
I mean, I think we have a lot of endocrine disruption. So I think really the question is sort of more, why do we have this, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about endocrine disruption, it could be from all the microplastics, it could be from environmental toxins. So the fact that testosterone is at an all-time low says something, right? Why is that? And so what's going on in our environment or our ecosystem or our lifestyle that's causing this low testosterone? So then the other question would be, should we just supplement the testosterone, or should we just remove the actual root cause of the problem, which could, let's say, for example, it's microplastics? Well, we probably should do a little bit of both, but focus on, let's get rid of the microplastics in the body. So I would say it's not a straightforward, solution, because the problem is not straightforward anymore. But, back in the days, let's say 20 years ago, people who had low testosterone, it was just because they're older and they get a little boost and it was good, right? Yeah. So, but I think now we're actually seeing it. Younger people need it. And I've even seen, not just on the testosterone side, we have women who are in early menopause now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem, I mean, some people say it's normal, some people say it's not. I mean, kind of depends, right? The side effects of going into menopause aren't great.
Yeah.
So is there a way to treat this? So I think even in the endocrinology world, it's not that the rules need to be rewritten. We need to actually understand disease pathology better. And we need to actually create more custom treatment formulas, right? It's not like number low, increase number. But that's a lot of medicine, right?
Pretty much.
It's like, I see a number that's low, I'm going to increase it. Great. Well, what about the other part? Don't worry about it. We're going to supplement that.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, right? Because I have one specific friend I'm thinking of. He drinks 5 Monsters a day, like the big cans.
Mm-hmm, the energy drink.
Yeah. And he always complains that he can't sleep. And he had low T. And I was like, hey, do you think that this habit is affecting your hormone levels? And he wouldn't talk to me about that. He's like, absolutely not. I looked online. Everybody said there's nothing I can do. So he goes on HRT. But I was like, if energy source or whatever you're taking in is like messing up everything inside of you, then how is there not a correlation? And I really liked what you said there, which is like, hey, can we actually unpack this problem? Because it's a problem that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, I think if you really think about what longevity, functional medicine, et cetera is, it's really just getting good or getting better at asking better questions. Right?
Yeah.
And I think the way the healthcare system is designed is that, the clinician has like 5 minutes for you. It's very hard to deep dive and get to know your client. And again, back to my original comment, the once a year annual physical is like kind of like a game to me, like meaning like, I think that's a joke.
Yeah.
It's like you're basically making someone hopefully feel better because you saw them once a year, but you actually don't really know them because a lot happens in 1 year. A lot can happen in 1 month, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is, I think medicine, there's going to be a little bit more of ownership on the patient client side because they're going to have to kind of own it more, not just because, oh, it's your body. No, it's because you need to double check. Does my provider care about me? Do they have enough time to get to know me? Am I actually are the right labs being even ordered for me because my insurance doesn't cover it? Like, it's so much more multifactorial. And again, hopefully AI can help people, right? I think that's going to be a big tool. I think the other aspect is education. I love to educate, and so you can watch YouTube clips or things that people who you think are smart and have good science or good answers. Study that.
Yeah, amazing. Last topic, and then I'll wrap it up. I've mentioned this just in passing. You have some of the, let's just call it, wealthiest, top tier, clients that pay a lot of money to invest in their health. What are you guys doing with them, and what are they excited about?
I think they're very excited about the next level, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll explore more things like cellular stuff. Obviously, NAD is a very common thing that they'll want, the IV version, which is a little bit expensive, right? Especially if you're doing it regularly. I think regenerative medicine is a big topic for them because they want to know, are there cellular therapies that they can pursue that can help their health? A good portion of that is just the out-of-pocket cost. There's a lot of tests that are not covered by insurance. And so you might even have a simple stool test, which is $500. Now, some stool tests are cheaper and they might be different for different reasons, but there's a large component of that. And then a lot of what I see in the space, people, their number one asset is time. And so they'll want to buy equipment and put it in their house. Some will make a whole biohacking facility in their home. They'll have PEMF, hyperbarics, red light therapies, all that stuff. So I think a lot of it's just to help them be more optimized. But some of them actually also have very complex diseases and they don't know where to go. Yeah. And so I would say it's a combination of stuff. I see people who have very complex medical illnesses and they want us to solve it. I see people who are relatively healthy and they want to just stay healthier, feel younger, perform more. And I think some people are just genuinely interested and they're like, well, if I'm doing good now, how do I stay this way or reverse my age? So, but I think everyone has the same needs. It's just about really understanding the science and figuring out what your needs are.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Chen, it's been a pleasure. How can people connect with you, find out more about you, and potentially work with you?
Yeah, we're pretty active on social media. So if you look any of my social media handles, it's at Dr. Halland, so DrHalland. And you can find us pretty much on Instagram, X, and any of the normal channels out there.
Amazing. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay.